For many officers, one of the most appealing aspects of the job is the fact that no two shifts are the same and no two calls are the same. Each is unique and presents its own set of challenges. But each call also presents its own set of opportunities, especially the opportunity to make a difference in the life of someone whose world has been turned upside down by the criminal acts of another. Recognizing this, the National Sheriff's Association teamed up with the U.S. Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime to provide you with a unique look at a number of specific crimes and victim populations, the individual impact of crime, and some of the steps you can take to make the most of the opportunities presented to you as a first responder. In the following video segments, you'll hear from individuals who have a very personal, first-hand perspective of the impact of crime. You'll also hear from law enforcement and other professionals who know that providing a greater level of service to victims of crime helps to build trust, build better relationships within the community, and build better cases. More importantly, it helps victims to begin the process of rebuilding their lives.
I have a gun. Give me your money, old man. And the thought went through my mind, this is it. It's over for us.
Elderly victims are going to have a difficult time wrestling with the fact that this happened.
If I hear somebody walking fast behind me, I have to look. I was never that way before. I never gave a thought, but I do now.
They're probably going to say, well, now I'm going to a rest home. They're going to take me out of my house. I'm not safe here. You know, so that just goes along with the fear. So you need to just kind of calm them down, you know, say, this is not your fault. You know, whoever did this to you, that's who's at fault. You did nothing wrong.
It's helpful if an elder can be interviewed in the morning before they've gotten tired. It's helpful to look around at the medications they may be taking. That may have an impact on their responses.
Speak slowly, clearly, distinctly. Assume that they can't hear as well as a very young person. Envision how you would do this call if this was your grandmother or your grandfather.
My granddaughter started at 12 on crack. She literally would go crazy. I mean, totally destroy things. I heard this crash, and I turned around in time to see this fella fly through the door, and here comes this other guy behind him. I thought, oh my gosh, she's told him to kill me.
Most people who victimize the elderly are family members. It's going to be sons and daughters. Put yourself in the place of a parent. No parent wants to send their child to jail. That's an absolute fact.
I couldn't turn my back on her because I loved her. She was my granddaughter.
Second issue is, if you put my caregiver in jail, who's going to take care of me? If the victim's constantly turning to the caregiver and the caregiver automatically starts responding, you know who's got the control in this household. And then you separate them.
Law enforcement will do well to build trust in any situation they encounter. This is, in fact, a generation that closed a deal with a handshake. And if you provide that handshake via sitting and listening carefully, you will get the trust and the complete story that you need from these folks.
The police, everyone, they were so nice to us. They were. They put us at ease. They let us know that there are other people who suffer these things.
Take the extra 5 minutes and listen to their story. They'll be your friend for life.
This crime was more than a sexual crime. Christopher was robbed of his innocence.
Christopher's offender was the athletic director at the school.
He was his best friend's dad. He was also Christopher's science teacher.
This coach stole my son. We all trusted him. And you know, why couldn't we see it happening? Officer Rick Nelson was the first officer from the Sheriff's Department to arrive at my home. It calmed me a lot by the way he talked with me. I really felt like I could trust him as a man, not just as an officer, but as a man. That meant a lot to me.
I really can't put my finger on anything that I actually may have told them other than just being compassionate to them, listening to what they had to say, and then tell them what we were going to do. 112, 107.
Rick Nelson was incredible. He absolutely had a mess on his hands when he walked into the door. He had a very angry father, had a very upset mother, had a very upset sibling, me, to deal with. And every last one of us have different emotions.
And he was able to help us with that immediately, but all done very, very gently.
I can remember when he first met Christopher, he smiled. His body language was there. His facial expressions were there. That's where I started building up the confidence that I can trust this guy. I had to trust this man too, not only Christopher.
One of the main things you don't want to do is put words in the child's mouth. You want to talk to the children and make your notes on what the children tell you. I sat down with the victim first when I first started the interview and just talked to him, kind of put him at ease, let him know that he was not responsible for what happened to him. A lot of first responders, when they go out, they go in and they get the information for a report, and that's it. That's all they're caring about is getting the report and getting back on the road. Sometimes that can hurt the case and the healing process, I believe. And we don't want to do that.
You want to prosecute this case, you want to get the bad guy, you want to, do everything that you're trained to do, but something as simple and as unseen as ministering to a victim's heart, that's got to come first.
People with disabilities, no matter if it's a physical disability, cognitive, they're viewed as easy targets. One Friday evening, I heard a noise in my bedroom, and I called for my attendant. There was a man that had a gun to her head, and there was another man behind him, and he had a knife. He straddled me from behind and put one hand over my mouth and the knife to my neck, and said, just do what we say and we won't hurt you.
The first responder is the first one that's going to relay the message to everybody else down the line that this person has a disability and needs accommodating.
The police officer asked me how to assist in getting me on the stretcher, which was very helpful.
We can be part of the recovery process by guidance and treating them with respect.
Asking the questions in a sensitive manner. Can I help you with anything? Do you need any assistive devices? And understand that because of their disability, that they're going to have limitations, and those limitations are going to make them more fearful.
Someone with a mental disability falls through the cracks probably more than any other. Typically, the person with the disability is not believed, mainly because of the inappropriate interaction, inappropriate communication, or their inability or their fear to tell anyone.
Avoid touching individuals that might have developmental disabilities. That tends to frighten them, especially when you're a uniformed officer who could be a fearful presence. Body language can be very threatening. We like to suggest that you try and get on the same eye level as these individuals, maybe by sitting down.
No yes or no answer type questions. Use open-ended questions, but give them time to answer them.
When your brother raped you, what did your family tell you to do?
I tell him stop. He went. Just did that. I tell him stop. Doesn't tell him he went. No. My dad stop. He wouldn't do it. No. I tell him stop. I try to kick him. I block him like this. I block him. And I try to kick him, but he got me. He held me down. No, like this. Held me down like this way. My hand like this way.
Patience is probably one of the most important communications techniques. Keep an open mind.
I was little when that happened. The girl that happened. The girl.
People with disabilities are people first. They might have a disability that they need some accommodations for, but that's secondary.
Osborne, Peru, you do not call the police when something happens because you'll be victimized by the police. It's basically don't look at the officers in the eyes. Don't say anything to them. It's very different than it is here. Here that kind of behavior would be suspicious.
Many of these victims come from countries which have tyrannical regimes. The victims probably have never been in touch with a government official. The victim has never used the law to protect herself or himself.
My English is not so good, and then the law is, I don't know what's the law, because this is America, it's not my country.
Don't assume that what we know to be correct is the same thing they know to be correct. Understand there may be a great deal of cultural difference.
Right away, put out a call for an interpreter, and then just try to find out what's going on. Even if the language isn't there, act it out, draw it on paper, or speak to them real softly and repeat it in different ways.
When you speak to them, don't use our slang terms. Use your best English to talk to them in a slow, precise manner.
It's very important to be respectful, and you want to be patient and kind and warm-hearted when talking to the victim. They're usually scared of you and what you're there for, because they may be illegal, and that's just a constant fear.
If my husband hurt me, I can protect myself, but my children cannot protect themselves because they're children.
Domestic violence is a big issue, and while it's a huge problem, it's a very little reported problem.
Many of the immigrant groups come from countries where there's gender imbalance. So women are afraid to speak up.
They'll tell you nothing happened, nothing's wrong. And we need to delve a little deeper and say, understand you're not in trouble. We're not going to try to do anything to you or deport you. You try to make it clear to them, we're just here to try to help.
The way an officer just carries himself or her in the neighborhood, just like a friendly demeanor, always talking to people, and that really helps with people trusting you and coming to you when they've been victimized.
Go slowly and be sensitive to the fact that this is overwhelming, this is frightening, and it's really a critical step that the person has come forward in the first place.
My daughter-in-law looked through the glass, and her eyes showed horror. And she said, "Nana, what's happened to you?" And I said, "I've been raped. I've been raped."
The general public has a perception in their mind of what a quote-unquote rape victim looks like, and there is no such picture. We expect women to be crying, hysterical, all over the place, falling apart. Some are, but most aren't.
The night that he raped me, they fixed his drinks and we went for a walk on the beach. That's where my memory starts going in and out.
In a drug-facilitated sexual assault, the victim herself isn't sure if she was really raped. So there's a lot of disbelief from the victim, let alone that someone else will believe her.
Once I realized that I had been raped, I didn't want to go to the police because I didn't think I was strong enough.
I've heard many law enforcement officers tell the victim, well, when you remember more, give me a call. And it's kind of the implication that nothing's going to happen until they remember more. And the reality is they're not going to remember more. And the case needs to be investigated on its other merits.
The initial contact with the first responder can greatly influence whether or not they decide to go on with other steps of the criminal justice process. And I can't think of anything more horrible than going through an experience like rape or a sexual assault, and then the people you tell don't believe you. I can tell you from firsthand experience. I was raped 10 years ago.
If they come across thinking that you don't care or you don't believe them, they're going to shut down right away.
When the police came, they right away were very kind and compassionate and empathetic. He was telling me, you did nothing wrong. That was, it was a very brave thing of you to call the police.
The truth is law enforcement officers, as first responders, do have to ask victims tough questions. Tell the victim that if they need to know why they're asking a question, it's okay to ask that.
I think that is the greatest thing they did, because at the time you're totally out of control after what has just happened to you.
As they start to tell the account of the assault, they're going to remember additional pieces of it. Doesn't mean they're making it up. It's a real normal part of the trauma process.
If you're compassionate with your interview and allow the victim to tell you what happened in her own way and in her own time, you'll obtain a lot more information. It'll come through that you're there, you want to be there, and you want to get this person through that.
I was rear-ended by a drunk driver. My car exploded, and I suffered burns over 95% of my body. I was expected to die.
A victim of an impaired driver, they have a lifetime of having to remember that. Their loss, their hurt, the things that they've gone through just motivated me even more to try to do the best job that we can.
This car, I don't know where it came from, out of the blue someplace. And it looked like, when I did see it, it looked like it had speeded up so fast I couldn't get out of the way at the time. I tried to, but I couldn't.
When you approach that scene, you have to look at the big picture. Put yourself in the victim's shoes. Anger, why me? Here I'm minding my own business, trying to get home. Why me? And you can't say, well, you just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time or whatever it may be. You can't say, I understand how you feel. How can you understand something that happened to them when it didn't happen to you? These kind of cliches, to me, only thing it does is aggravate the suffering even more.
I don't understand people when they say accident. I don't think that's an accident. Think about your family first, how you would feel.
Be patient. You have to. When you see aggressiveness from the victims sometimes, a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, they're just plain crazy. Well, that's not the case. Advocate medical treatment and have them looked at. Bring in support for them too. Don't make them be there by themselves. It's just like us. We don't want to be alone if something traumatic happens, and that's the one thing I would advocate too.
I always said this is never going to happen to me. Ever since the wreck 2 years ago, I haven't been able to walk at all, hardly. This is reality, and it's not just something they read in a story or see on a movie.
We're here to serve and protect. Let's take the steps towards recovery.
seeing hope that this nightmare will pass.
How can you ever prepare for unexpected death?
Jeff had been kidnapped by gang wannabes. They beat him, put a gun to his temple, and pulled the trigger. Then they set his body on fire.
To tell somebody that they lost a loved one. That's one of the hardest jobs in our career.
If I was at that door and someone knocked at the door and told me what I'm going to tell them, how would I want to be told?
Go inside. Don't stand in a doorway. Don't take them into a crowd if you're at your crime scene. Take them someplace private. People use the word, well, the decedent, or they deceased. Like, how impersonal is that? When you're sitting there using names, you're showing your care. You're personalizing it.
Detective Frogley's gentle voice and his gentle nature helped me considerably get through this horror. He did not lose a step as I started rattling off questions.
Detective Frogley?
I cannot and will not ever be able to thank him enough for that.
Getting them information as quickly as possible and being there to answer any of their follow-up questions is very, very, I can't even emphasize how important that is.
This is a time that you have to present something direct, compassionate, to the point. Don't be evasive. Don't leave pictures in their mind. And always have somebody with you, too. I advocate that to the utmost extreme.
I was in a war. I was in Korea. I was wounded twice. Hurt like hell, but I didn't cry. When my son was murdered, I cried. I had a whole lot of anger that I did not know how to control or what to do with it. I had to lash out in some form or fashion.
Be non-judgmental. Bring in their own support group, which is their family, friends, a pastor, priest, somebody, advocates, somebody that they can cling on to.
Make sure that those lives that are just so intertwined with that death, doesn't spiral out of control anymore, because so many other things can go wrong when you find yourself neck deep in trauma.
You're the one to provide them the worst news they'll ever hear. And how you leave that residence is how you're going to be remembered.
Trafficking is one of the biggest challenges because people still cannot believe that it is happening here today in the 21st century.
Local law enforcement and community-based organizations and service providers are the most likely to encounter trafficking victims. But to be able to identify and assist victims and to prosecute traffickers, responding officers need to be knowledgeable about the overall dynamics of human trafficking.
The actual definition of trafficking is the harboring, the transporting, the providing, or the obtaining of the victim for a purpose of commercial sex or forced labor. The trafficker sometimes operates with smugglers, but smuggling is different than trafficking. A person can enter into the United States legally or illegally, and they have no idea they're going to be trafficked. Victims can be anyone. They can be men, women, and children. They could be a migrant farm worker. They could be doing sweatshop work. They could be in somebody's house providing cleaning or nanny service. They force them or they coerce them into doing things against their will. And essentially, the trafficker makes money off of them. Trafficking is the third largest criminal industry in the world. It's a very lucrative business.
They don't feed me, and then they lock up the door. We cannot go outside.
Traffickers want to hide their victims, but sometimes they hide them in plain sight. But sometimes a rural location might be a good place because nobody's really looking for trafficking victims.
These cases are everywhere. They're in anybody's neighborhood, in any state.
First responding officers encounter human trafficking situations without even knowing it, because it doesn't manifest itself in a way that is often recognizable.
We work so hard. We work every day, 17 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
They're in involuntary servitude, maybe a debt bondage. They have to hand over their entire paycheck or a big portion of it to the trafficker. Their interest in paying whatever debt they have off is very high. Maybe they get charged ridiculous fees.
She told me that if I came here, I was going to earn a lot of money, that I would leave all that poverty and I was going to be able to help my brothers.
What happens is the debt accumulates to such a degree they will never pay it off and they will never get out of the trafficking situation.
Officers should be on the watch for people who come from other countries, don't have documents with them, who seem scared.
In Thailand, it's very easy to have people killed.
Something that we have heard 100% across the board is the fear that the family in the country of origin will be harmed because of this situation. They're so frightened, and they are very frightened of law enforcement because that is one of the major threats that traffickers hold over their heads. If you try to get help, if you try to go to law enforcement in the United States, they will beat you, they will rape you, they will arrest you, they will see that you get deported.
Try to make that personal connection, to establish a rapport with them so that this person knows that this law enforcement officer is not here just to enforce the law, but to help me if I need help.
So it's really important that officers work together with an NGO, with a community partner to talk to their victims.
The majority of clients that we serve are from, of course, countries where they speak little or no English, so we need to make sure that the information that is being relayed to them, they do understand.
What the officers need to keep in mind is to go a bit beyond their usual protocol, to ask a series of questions that hopefully will elicit a story.
Questions like, is this what you thought you would be doing when you came here? Or do you have access to your documents? Do you know where your passport is?
The common denominator is that these people were told one thing, and when they came here, the reality was another. And it's really the conditions under which they are held here that makes it a trafficking case.
All I hear is gunshots. I see a kid laying on the ground and didn't know what was going on. Sounded like a cap gun. We didn't know.
About a third of the building has been blown away.
I had no idea what had happened. And the next thing I know, just unbelievable noise everywhere.
And it's such a senseless, cowardly act of violence. It's been a very emotional time for me.
I've talked to crime victims and others who have been involved in major events 20 years after the fact. And they will still tell you that the person that stands out in their mind is that law enforcement officer that was first on the scene. The most beneficial things that a responder can provide to a victim of a mass casualty is their presence and the assurance that I'm here with you. You're not alone now. And secondly, typically it's information. People want to know what has happened.
It's a lockdown. They've been told they can't leave. Chelsea, I'm not going to leave the parking lot until you're here.
Going into these situations, you're looking for the immediate need, which is physical aid. You want to attend to the injuries. If the event is ongoing, if the chaos factors are just, off the scale. The first responder doesn't really have an opportunity at that point to do a lot of crisis intervention. To get them out of that environment can do a lot toward mitigating the impact of that event.
It's okay, Daddy, I'm okay.
You can't generalize what a reaction may be like. The impact of that event is a very subjective thing. You'll see people who have, that 1,000-yard stare and just facially nothing going on. And you will see people reacting in a variety of different ways that may not seem consistent with what's happening. Maybe that's laughing, maybe that's making jokes about something. So it's important for first responders to try to fill them in if they can. Acknowledge the event. Let them know what has happened and what the plan from there is going to be. You can't do anything about what's already happened. You can't change the evil that's been done there. But you can make the recovery for that individual a little better.